Let's bring in MS Now senior Capitol Hill reporter and host of Way Too Early, Ali Vitale, along with MS Now contributor Paula Ramos and former ICE Deputy Chief of Staff John Amaya. So, Ali, Democrats have really pushed to hear from Noam for months now, since the deaths of Renee Good and Alex Preddy in Minnesota. How's it going so far?
We expected, Anna, that this hearing was going to be tense, and certainly it has been that from the very start. One of the questions that I asked Secretary Noam as she was walking into the room, and I know she heard it because the hallway was silent, was, do you regret calling Alex Preddy a domestic terrorist in the aftermath of his being shot by Border Patrol officials? That's exactly the line of questioning that the top Democrat on the committee, Dick Durbin, picked up with. I want to play that exchange for you. Watch.
It was something that they were transpiring and sharing information
them as
with us.
Terrorists. Can you explain why you decided to brand these victims that we all saw on video, who were out protesting the activities of your agency and were killed as a result of it? How did you think that calling them domestic terrorists at that scene was somehow going to calm the situation?
You know, Senator, we are working in those situations where there's a tragic loss of life and that there is something that our agents are involved in, that we continue to deliver information.
Is it so hard to say you were wrong?
We continue, as these investigations continue to go, we will provide, I absolutely strive to provide factual information, and we'll continue to do that.
And when you fail, do you admit it publicly?
Absolutely. We always know that there's room for improvement, that we will.
And protesters, Anna, have plagued this hearing throughout its first hour or so. You can see that live footage of Senator Kennedy of Louisiana now taking his time to question Noam. But I want to look ahead to a few of the people who are on this committee that I'm specifically looking closely at. That's Senator Thom Tillis of North Carolina, who has been outspoken in the halls with reporters about the fact that he would like to see Noam step down from her post, in part because of the actions on the ground in Minneapolis and how chaotic and tragic the actions of Border Patrol officials were there on the ground. And then I'm also looking at Senator Amy Klobuchar, of course, of Minnesota. This hits home for her. It is her home state. She's also on the ballot now for governor there, and so interested in what her line of questioning is to the secretary. But this comes as the secretary's own agency of DHS is actually in a shutdown. It's been that way for weeks, and no real sign that anything is going to change that posture. That being said, that is now true in an atmosphere where we are now at war, or at least in open conflict with Iran, and threat levels remain high across the U.S. Anna?
Ali Vitale, thank you for laying it out for us. We'll let you get back to listening to this hearing. Paula, there's what happened in Minnesota. There's what's happening in the detention facilities. There's the DHS shutdown. There's now a war with Iran. What do you see as the most pressing question today that Noam should face?
Are we safe? That's the question. I think you begin the show talking about Iran. The Senate committee begins the testimony in this hearing by questioning about Iran. American voters are waking up today thinking about this one simple question. Are we safe, and are we safe under Kristi Noem?
It's the question my daughter is asking, who is 10 years old. And what's happening with this war? Are we safe?
Exactly. And there's reason for voters to not trust Kristi Noem right now, right? Because this is someone that was so quick to label someone like Renee Good and Alex Preddy as domestic terrorists, right? This is someone that has put the majority of DHS resources into treating immigrants as the fundamental existential threat that this country is facing. And even as ICE has become the highest funded law enforcement agency within the government, even with that fact, they're still not going after the worst of the worst, right? Less than 14% of people that have been detained by ICE have violent criminal records. And so I think it is a fair question to look at the state of the country, to look at the fact that we have attacked 7 countries in the international community, and ask yourself, are you safe? Because at the end of the day, what Kristi Noem has been doing is really fighting against an invisible enemy. Now, this invisible enemy, which is the immigrant, now this invisible boogeyman. And that fight is not based on truly making us safe. It's not based on public safety. It's a cultural fight, right? It's a fight really around preserving a type of homeland. And so there's a reason why what Senator Durbin was doing, which was trying to get her official definition of what she sees as a domestic terrorist.
And I'm so glad you brought up the fact that DHS is in charge of so many different aspects of our security, not just immigration issues, but of course there's FEMA, there's TSA, there's the terrorist threat. John, here's more from the hearing. Noam pressed on a case involving a man in custody while his daughter was dying of cancer, as we've been continuing to get more and more examples that have called into question who they are detaining. Let's take a listen.
How does taking a father from a child dying of cancer qualify? Where would that be? Is that a violent crime?
I don't know what you're speaking or referencing
I'll tell you exactly
to.
what I'm speaking of. Ruben Torres, 2 weeks ago, buried his daughter Ophelia. When he was arrested at the Home Depot in Norridge, Illinois, he said to those your agents, please let me go home. My daughter is dying of cancer. I would like to be with her in her last days of her life. They said no. They arrested him and deported him for 2 weeks. Finally, he returned for a court hearing. His daughter lived to see that hearing where the court said he was treated unfairly by your agency, and she died 3 days later. I was at her memorial service. Is that really necessary? Was he a violent criminal?
Sir, we enforce the law. The laws that are passed by this
law?
body and signed into statute on the process for individuals that are in this country illegally, that have final removal orders, and the process given in immigration law. We continue to follow that, and if you don't like the law, I would suggest you change the law.
John, what do you make of that?
I think the Secretary's response is rather tragic. Not quite as tragic as the loss of a child. When we were at the Department of Homeland Security under President Obama, we had a very similar fact pattern with a very ill child. And the leadership of enforcement and removal operations, which is one of the two main components of ICE, Homeland Security investigations being the other, then under the leadership of Tom Homan, easily came to the conclusion that we should exercise our discretion and ensure that family can be together during the most tragic of periods any mother and father can experience with their very ill child. It's offensive that she doesn't acknowledge that the agency always has the discretion, and there are always ulterior options to detention and other forms of custody and monitoring that can take place to do this in the most humane way possible. I think many of us agree that housing and caging hundreds of thousands of people, which is what appears this administration wants to do, is not humane. No country that has ever done that has ever looked at its history in a positive way. I don't think we should go there. But I think what this really goes at is at the core of what Senator Durbin began his opening comments with, which is the erosion of law may begin with immigrants, but it doesn't end there. And we're seeing that right now with the erosion of the Fourth Amendment and the First Amendment. And I think Americans better be paying attention.
Noem has been in charge of this immigration crackdown. She oversaw CBP when they were involved with shutting down Texas's airspace. Judges have been accusing her department of violating multiple court orders. John, as we look forward to future issues facing this country, do you have any confidence in Noem's ability to address them?
I haven't heard anything yet that gives me such confidence. There have been few opportunities to actually have candid conversations, few opportunities like this one to have true oversight. And I will tell you anecdotally from dozens of individuals, careerists, not politicals, careerists that I have spoken with, that I know personally, from ICE to CBP to TSA and the Secret Service. It is clear that what has happened over the last year has created such a level of distrust and frustration that there are many law enforcement officials that truly feel they're not allowed to do their job. And to what Ms. Ramos asked to begin in her comments, they asked themselves, are we executing policy, operations in a way that makes the country safer? And the answer, 99.9% of the time, is no.
John Amaya and Paola Ramos, thank you both. We'll be checking back in with you as we continue to monitor this hearing this morning. Thanks so much.